Good evening. Welcome to Talk Ottawa. Ottawa's population is aging, and lots of people have questions about whether or not we are ready to cope with our aging population. Do we have the services in place that we need? As the population ages, are there enough places for aging seniors to stay? Is healthcare configured in our community to serve this growing population of seniors? We're going to talk about all of those issues and more tonight. We've assembled a panel to look at some of the issues facing our community, and let me introduce those people to you, starting with Bernard Bouchard, who is the Executive Director of the Council on Aging. Sharon Collins is Vice President of the Board at the Good Companions Centre, and Margaret Dunn is the Chair of the City of Ottawa Seniors Advisory Committee. And we just want to emphasize that you're here to speak on with your own thoughts on this, not on behalf of the City of Ottawa, but you do have the role of being the chair of that advisory committee at the city. So let me ask that first question as broadly as possible. Are we ready for what's happening here, Bernard?
Well, that's a good question. We seem to be in a time of transition, of looking at integration, looking at community services. Certainly, we do have a lot of important services in place right now. It's a question of, how do we make sure that we can meet the need and that we're able to have the proper integration so seniors can remain in their own home when they have to, and then when the time comes, be able to have a service available. So the question is very difficult to answer just because we're in a state of flux right now.
How well do we understand what the requirement is for individual seniors, much less a growing community of seniors?
Well, in 2004, the Council on Aging had a project and did a research paper called Successful Aging Ottawa. And they surveyed 1,000 seniors at that time to look at, how they were doing, what their incomes were, whether or not they had specific issues. And in that report, there were some interesting findings, looking at in terms of how are they managing? Are they taking care of themselves? Are they eating properly? Are they taking their medication? And overall, the picture seemed quite bright at that time. But there were some issues identified, specifically around the issue of affordable housing, looking at some healthcare issues. The fact that home care, when someone wants to stay at home, it's very difficult sometimes to have these services in place. So, and more recently, the Council on Aging is part of a project called Age Friendly Ottawa. We're in year 2 of that. That's being funded by the Trillium Foundation, the Community Foundation, and New Horizons. And we're working with the City of Ottawa very closely to look at how things changed since 2004 and what are the priorities. And this past summer, we just completed a series of consultations with seniors, many of the vulnerable groups that are out there. So we're starting to get a picture now of what are the priorities, have they changed since 2004, and what can we do to improve things for seniors.
Margaret, what do you think? First on that broader question, are we ready for the transformation that's ahead of us? I heard a statistic recently that by the year 2050, for example, that there will be one senior for every person who is between the age of 20 and 65. Or sorry, for every 2.2 people between the age of 20 and 65.
In response to Bernard and to your question, I think that it's now, there's been some substantial research done and the demographic is there. What's really come to the attention, if you look at citywide services, but it's not exclusive to city. It is so many people, so many agencies, so many different pieces that have to come together. But I think it's been much more brought home across all departments and service providers that they can't work in isolation, that everything will have a kind of trigger effect or a domino effect for some plan to do something else. And the more the city grows in sprawl, some of that is also a detriment to providing services closer to home, to those things that we want to do to keep people at home, healthy, local comfort, things that are very important to people, that they're not going that far afield. But I think what's been more of an enlightenment is that the demographic analysis that's been done and some of the trends, as well as looking at federal reports like the Senate report on aging, have shown that you cannot plan for this in isolation of other things. And that's also then shaping how people approach their work and their project management on large tasks. Yeah.
All right, Sharon, let's bring you into the conversation, and I do want to talk about some of the specific services that the Good Companions Centre offers, but before we do that, what's your thought on how well the city is coping with this big change that's coming?
Well, we're looking at a prevention model at the Good Companions because all of our work is done before the care side of things. So we're looking at keeping the older adults healthy so that as we move into the next phase, we're not dealing with as many mental and physical disabilities. So coming from that perspective, we're really trying to keep our adults healthy, our older adults healthy,
right,
and moving and hoping that we will not be putting the burden on the healthcare system that...
So it's a proactive,
approach.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, and we'll talk more about what some of those programs and initiatives are at the Good Companions Centre coming up. Let's come back to this concept of successful aging.
Right.
What is successful aging? How would you define that?
Well, looking at a person's independence, for example, that's a big component of it. Their engagement in the community. It's important that as we grow old, that we eat properly. That's sort of a third component. Health literacy. That seniors are aware, how to take care of themselves, to exercise, to engage in the community. And I think that while many seniors in Ottawa are doing quite well in terms of their active and their volunteering, I think we often underestimate the contribution that seniors make in terms of volunteering and their financial contributions in terms of they're always seen in context of hospitals and hospital beds and not being able to. So there's a sort of a trend that we're trying to reverse, quite frankly, so that we have a positive image of seniors, and that is occurring. So for those seniors that are doing well, that's great, but there's at least 10 or 12% we calculate out there that are isolated and vulnerable. These are seniors that don't have family members, have very little contact. And what's difficult about addressing isolated and vulnerable seniors is that you don't know who they are, and they have very little contact. So the kind of contacts they do have are through church groups or sort of interfaith network or going out there. So there's a lot of elements. So when you talk about the age-friendly project, there's really 8 areas that they look at: transportation, social inclusion, communication. So that, and what we're doing is we've gone through the focus groups and the consultation, and we're trying to identify the areas that we want to see improvement. Now, this project really began with the World Health Organization. So the Council on Aging and the City of Ottawa made a joint application, and Ottawa was successful to be designated as working towards being age-friendly. So we're right in that process right now. So there's some specific guidelines that we can measure whether or not we're moving in the right direction. But we've just begun the process, and we've gotten a temporary approval. It's a two-year agreement with the World Health Organization, City of Ottawa, and ourselves, and we're trying to move forward so that we can identify which areas we can work on first, and maybe which ones will take a longer time to get there.
Before we talk more about solutions, I wanted to hear from each of you about how different life is for a senior compared to, say, when they were in their 40s or 50s. What changes in their world? Margaret, maybe you can talk about this. What are some of the new decisions that they have to make? What are some of the new considerations that they have at that stage of their life that maybe somebody who's younger may not accept and realize?
Well, one that I am particularly sensitive to is you need to be your own advocate. You need to be informed. Yes, the internet has gotten so much there now. Not everyone is internet savvy, so it means if that's not your way of getting information, you have to pursue information in person, in meetings, in hard copy. And there is a tendency for an assumption, I think, sometimes that everyone knows that it's there on the internet. But one of the things I was involved in was as a volunteer with a group that has just been so good at bringing information, a vulnerable group at 64, if they're on ODSP or OW, Ontario Works or Disability, when they transition at 65, it's a new world, it's a new game. It's a new health benefit. In a drug plan, it's OAS. they have found it so rewarding to be invited to a meeting to walk through those steps and then do the paperwork. So that is not for everybody. Some people will sail right through it, but there have to be a variety of mechanisms offered to people. And I think the other is that the social media, there are some who are on the bandwagon, there are some who are with it, and they're sailing right away with it, and it changes a lot of campaigns and things like that that people are involved in. There's a group that won't ever be using all of the social media. But it was interesting, the Drummond report, one of the observations that's made in the Drummond report says, do for yourself, be prepared, make people understand your end-of-life decisions. And it was interesting because Bernard has talked about the impacts on healthcare. It's a statement in there that says you owe it to your family, you owe it to your loved ones, you owe it to not have those situations arise in emergency rooms where there's a clash of family members. And it was a very interesting piece. He just says this conversation needs to take place. And some people would shy away from that and say, I couldn't possibly do that, or I couldn't ask my family members to do that. But I think that's an empowerment thing. It's you're taking responsibility, and you're also showing that you're considering your family and your network for that kind of thing.
That is an important point, and I want to talk more about that. But maybe you can talk a little bit about this, Sharon. When you see the people who are coming to the Good Companion Center, who are obviously at a different stage of their life because they're perhaps not working anymore. They are perhaps on a fixed income now. What are some of the new realities that seniors are having to confront in our community?
Well, first of all, we've got two different demographics coming into the community. You've got the younger, older adults, and then the older, frail adults. So you've got two different streams that are going at the same time.
And not everybody's on the same timetable, obviously.
Not at all.
So some people,
not at all,
when they're 70, might still be able to live largely the way they did when they're 50, and other people when they're 70 might be dealing with health issues, might be having to think about moving to a different type of living arrangement, and so on, right?
So we've got the frail older, so we have to deliver programs to them to make them healthier to live in their own homes. Then we've got the younger older adults that are looking for adventure in their lives, yet you still have to bring them, help them along in maybe their social areas, or perhaps they're not working anymore, so therefore they need a new network. Self-esteem decreases often at that point in time, so the social network is extremely, extremely important. There was a study done in the US, the longitudinal study on aging. It's about 53, 54 years old now. The three things we need to age healthy is healthy eating, exercise, and social interaction. It's very huge. And that's one of the big projects at the Good Companions, is to develop that social network, both at those two levels, both at the younger and the older level. And that's a big problem for us right now, is dealing with the younger population.
But if you can do that, if you can develop that social network, you also develop resiliency. So if something happens in your life, if illness occurs, if a death occurs, you've got some balance, and you also have developed that network so that it can also be a support to you.
Yeah, we did a study 2 years ago, a member survey, and that came through very clear. It helps Alice be her. If it weren't for the Good Companions, I would be so lonely. This is my life now. So these are the things that we're finding through the work that we're doing. Is the social network.
But I think when I think of the senior center that I've volunteered with, there are volunteers whose 90th birthdays have been celebrated there in recognition and have 30 years of service, and they're so connected there that they're giving back. The intergenerational thing is happening. They're teaching young students from some of the school programs what their craft work is, and that's just so rewarding, and they take such joy in that.
Bernard, maybe you can jump in here, because when I think ahead to when I'm older and maybe not working, I think of that being a completely different stage of life, where the things that I sort of accept as a given now and that are realities in my world today, many of those things will be gone. I won't be as self-sufficient. I might be confronting a health issue. I might need to rely on people for transportation. I might need to live in a different home. I won't get the same sense of accomplishment I get out of going to work every day because I might not be working then. So lots of things change at that stage of life, right?
Well, a lot of what we're getting, the stories we're getting out now seem to be more on the negative side. Like, where if you're a senior now, you're thinking about, I should work till 67, not 65, or I shouldn't use so much health care, or maybe I should pay for my own medication. So, and I think that's a result really of the fact that there's a reduction of resources at the community